Do you hear that? That humming?
I don't think so.
No? Maybe your subconscious mind does.
Let's talk about it. Silent sound spread spectrum, also known as SSSS, S-Quad, or simply SQUAD, is, according to some, a secret technology used by the United States government, specifically the Department of Defense, that utilizes high-frequency broadcast waves to subliminally influence the American public by influencing their subconscious brains using inaudible messaging. Basically, it's mind control through sound, but super high-pitched sound, so we can't actually hear it, but our subconscious internalizes it nonetheless. This kind of mind control can be done pretty much anywhere, at any time. The SSSSs are broadcasted using radio waves, and radio waves are everywhere. Side effects of the silent sound spread spectrum can also include fear, anxiety, despair, and hopelessness. Not so fun.
Starting in 1953, staff working at the US Embassy in Moscow started noticing something weird. For some reason, they were being hit with low-level microwave radiation. It wasn't super strong, but it was there, and nobody really knew why. This odd occurrence came to be known as the Moscow signal. The US government got really curious and a bit freaked out about it, obviously, and they decided to launch an investigation to figure out what was going on. The signals were suspected to be coming from Soviet forces, but why? Well, the major worry was that they were attempting to cause health issues in the staff, but there were no obvious effects on the staff's health or behavior, at least nothing they realized at the time. Of course, the conspiracy is that this was some sort of mind control experiment. Now, during the investigation, they found out that the microwaves were hitting the embassy at different times and strengths, but they couldn't come up with a clear answer about the purpose at first.
While SSSS technology is supposedly generally used for influencing the American public, it has apparently been used in more intense settings as well, like the Iraq War. In 1998, it was reported that the US military had used an inaudible mind control system on Saddam Hussein's military that caused them to surrender to the American troops. Basically, what had happened was, after Saddam's military command and control system was destroyed, the Iraq military began using commercial MF radio stations, which gave US forces the perfect opportunity to deploy their secret weapon of mass compliance. United States Army men set up a portable MF transmitter that was used to overpower Iraqi broadcast signals and replace them with patriotic American music, as well as contradictory plans of American military action. Now, there are a number of people out there who believe that at the same time all of this was taking place, the US troops were also broadcasting SSSS, or psychoacoustic radio signals, over the radio waves, which is what some say is ultimately what led to the Iraq surrender. Either that, or the Iraqi troops truly just could not listen to one more minute of Sweet Home Alabama.
So after the US found out about the Moscow signal I spoke about earlier, they got pretty nervous and decided they needed to understand more about what was going on. They kicked off Project Pandora to figure out if those microwaves hitting the US Embassy in Moscow were dangerous and what the Soviets were up to. Now, they did determine that the microwave transmission was being caused by an espionage device. The Soviets were essentially listening in. The reason behind that was pretty obvious. I mean, this was the Cold War after all, but could the microwave radiation affect the human brain and body? They enlisted scientists and doctors and started experimenting with microwave radiation on animals. They also looked at how microwave radiation might affect things like sleep patterns and cognitive abilities. One of the main things they checked was if the microwaves could be used to send secret messages directly into people's heads, like a form of subliminal communication. The project went on for a few years, and they claimed that the signals had no serious effects on the health of the staff at the US Embassy. But years later, this became highly disputed. It seems as if the staff at the Moscow Embassy had a higher rate of cancer than the general population. See, back in 1976, the US Department of State asked Abraham Leinfield, a researcher from Johns Hopkins University, to do a study. His job was to check if the people working at the Moscow Embassy were getting sick more often than those at other US embassies in Eastern Europe. They also included the families of these staff members in their research. In 1978, the study wrapped up and reported that there were no bad health effects linked to the microwave radiation. But years later, in 2019, A new study from Spain re-examined the old data, along with some declassified information. This new analysis showed that the employees at the Moscow embassy in 1976 died of cancer at a higher rate compared to the general population. They also found that these employees had worse overall health compared to staff at other European embassies. It also turned out that in 1975, Ambassador Walter Stiuso, who'd worked at the embassy, started getting really sick. His symptoms were pretty scary too, like literally bleeding from the eyes scary. He eventually died of leukemia. And during that time, US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger had a phone call where he talked about Stiuso's illness. Kissinger mentioned that he thought the microwaves might be linked to his health problems and that they were trying to, quote, keep the thing quiet.
If SSSS signals have the power to make you feel scared, hopeless, anxious, and depressed, could they be the reason behind the mental health epidemic going on in America? In 2019, the National Library of Medicine conducted a study to determine just how severely human cognitive function could be affected by certain sounds and, more specifically, certain frequencies. The results showed that, and I quote, mental workload and visual auditory attention is significantly reduced when the participants are exposed to noise at 95 decibels. In 2013, another study was conducted by the National Institute of Health about the effects of noise on a person's mental health. The conclusion to this study was that, and again I quote, noise annoyance can be a mediator between noise exposure and mental ill health, especially depression. Basically, there is conclusive evidence out there that translates to, yes, if the government uses silent sound spread spectrum broadcasting, it could very well be causing Americans en masse to experience a severe decline in their mental health. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. One, to make the rich get richer through big pharma, and two, because a depressed person is less likely to fight back against depression, and a confused person is less likely to notice that depression in the first place.
So the Moscow signal isn't the only reported case of these mysterious transmissions. Starting around late 2016, US and Canadian diplomats in Cuba began experiencing strange symptoms. People reported hearing weird sounds like buzzing or grinding, and soon after they started feeling dizzy, nauseous, and got headaches. Some even had trouble thinking clearly and experienced memory loss. These symptoms were so odd and severe that the affected diplomats had to seek out medical help. Doctors found that many of them had almost concussion-like symptoms, even though they hadn't been physically hit on the head. Now, at first, no one really knew what was going on. There were lots of theories, though. Some thought it might be a sonic attack using sound waves to mess with people's brains. Others suspected some kind of microwave weapon. Another theory was that it was just psychological, some sort of mass hysteria where people start showing symptoms because they only believe they're being attacked. But these were some pretty serious symptoms, and they've lasted. One diplomat who chose to remain anonymous uses a hearing aid to this day. The US government started investigating. They even pulled some staff out of Havana because they were worried about their safety. Now, later on, similar incidents were even reported by diplomats in other places like China and Washington, D.C. Until this day, there's been no official explanation.
While silent sound spread spectrum is mainly an American conspiracy theory, it is entirely possible that other countries also have access to this technology or similar technologies. Other countries like Russia. In February of 1959, 9 experienced hikers were found dead on Dyatlov Pass in the Ural Mountains of Russia. The hikers' tent had been ripped apart from the inside, and despite it being winter in Russia and the ground being covered in snow, many of the men were found scattered around the pass, shoeless, sockless, and even naked. One of the bodies showed signs of blunt force, and another one of the hikers was missing their tongue. Oh, and many of their clothes were radioactive. So what the heck happened? Did they all go mad after stumbling across a secret radioactive military base and subsequently being blasted with something called infrasound? Well, yes. Possibly. In fact, it's kind of the leading theory online. So what is infrasound? Well, it's kind of the opposite of S-Quad. While the supposed American psychoacoustic radio signals use incredibly high inaudible frequencies, infrasound uses barely audible frequencies that are incredibly low to affect cognitive ability and function. Another difference is that while SSSS can cause people to experience brain fog, anxiety, fear, hopelessness, and depression, infrasound is known known to cause people to panic, hyperventilate, experience vision loss, and hallucinations. Hallucinations that might lead to a person cutting off their tongue, bashing their friend over the head, and stripping down to their birthday suit in the middle of February on the mountains in Russia. Generally, infrasound occurs naturally in nature, which is scary to think of in and of itself, but it's the fact that many of these hikers appear to be radioactive that makes myself and many others online think that maybe, just maybe, Russia found a way to create infrasound technologies, and they now use these technologies to protect some of the country's greatest and most terrifying secrets.
We've talked a lot about the Cold War in this video, and the possibilities of some kind of nefarious sound wave technology thingy, but has there ever been a known, documented machine? It's called the LIDA Machine. The LIDA Machine was developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The machine was designed to use low-frequency radio waves to influence people's brains and bodies. The machine emitted low-frequency radio waves that could actually penetrate the body. The idea was that these waves might affect brain function, causing changes in behavior or health. It was used in an attempt to control or alter sleep patterns, induce relaxation, or even manipulate mental states. The Soviets claimed the machine could be used to help with sleep disorders or stress management, but given the political climate at the time, there were fears that it was being developed for the military, either to be used as a weapon or to aid in their soldiers' performance by altering their mental states. Well, how'd you like the sound of that?
Are you being brainwashed right now currently?
You might be.
Yeah.
Not by us though. Certainly not by us. We'll catch you guys in the very next video.
Cheers.